Good morning. So I think it's our time to start. Thank you. Our guest of honor, Honorable Minister of Environment, and the Ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany to Rwanda, and the Ambassador of the EU to Rwanda, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. So we welcome you to this second edition of the Kigali Climate Talks for both those joining in person and online. Today is another significant day as we convene for the second event in this important series, jointly organized by the Germany Embassy in Kigali and the Government of Rwanda, long-standing partners in climate and environmental initiatives. This edition focuses on climate finance, powering adaptation and resilience. Our goal today is to foster meaningful dialogue and action and international climate discussion, agreements, obligation, and to explore how these can be effectively advanced in the Rwandan context. So my name is Basil Uwimana, and it's an honor to be the MC and moderator for this event. These talks are intended not just to foster dialogue, but to promote the implementation of the global climate change agenda here in Rwanda. We are gathered here as government representatives, development partners, civil society members, academia, industry leaders, and youth. I would like especially to recognize the Dean and the students from the University of Rwanda School of Architecture and Built Environment for hosting us and also joining today's event. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, here as a brief overview of our program, we'll begin with a welcome remarks from our estimated guests of honor, followed by a presentation of the state of the climate finance negotiations. We then have a moderated discussion on climate finance, powering adaptation and resilience, which will include, of course, the Q&A session. And afterwards, we'll wrap up with a networking session. So thank you for being here to support and contribute to this crucial dialogue. Let's make this session of the second edition of the Kigali Climate Talks a resounding success. So I would like also to give you some housekeeping notes before we start. So let's keep each other safe by maintaining a safe distance, avoiding physical contact, and maintaining good hygiene. We encourage you to take advantage of the hand sanitizers available in the room and outside. So bathrooms are located across the quad, and ushers will be there to available to direct you. As part of our efforts to limit single-use plastics, water from dispensers is available at the front and back of the auditorium. So if you're tweeting about this event, please use the hashtag Kigali Climate Talks and our lovely hashtag Green Rwanda. So for those who are joining online, please use the chat feature to ask any question during the Q&A sessions. So it is now my pleasure to welcome our guest of honor to deliver their remarks. We'll first hear from the Minister of Environment, Dr. Valentine Uwamariya, and we are lucky to have someone who truly cares about putting our planet first, and we are excited to be with you, Honorable Minister, this morning. So let's give her a warm welcome as he joins the stage.
Ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany to Rwanda, Ambassador of the European Union to Rwanda, Dean of the School of Architecture and Built Environment, University of Rwanda, and of course the principal, sorry, I should have started with the principal of the College of Science and Technology. Distinguished guests, friends of environment, good morning. It is a great honor to welcome you to the second edition of Kigali Climate Talks. While this is my first time to attend the Kigali Climate Talks, I know this event has become a vital platform for us to reflect on global climate negotiations and their implications for Rwanda. It provides an invaluable opportunity to contextualize international climate discussions within our national framework. With the historic COP28 behind us and COP29 just around the corner, it is essential that we act decisively and thoughtfully. These talks provide us with that opportunity, and I would like to thank the government of Germany for making today possible. For any climate action to be effective, we must ensure inclusivity. We must bring together all stakeholders and give a voice to all, because everyone can be a climate action champion. This collective approach transforms our discussions into concrete actions that advance our national climate goals and move us from dialogue to sustainable implementation. The Kigali Climate Talks are particularly crucial as these discussions link global agreements with our national strategies. We must ensure that the key decisions from COPs, especially regarding ambitious reduction targets set under the Paris Agreement, reflect our priorities and support our efforts in implementing climate actions effectively. The Kigali Climate Talks also present a valuable opportunity The Kigali Climate Talks also present a valuable opportunity for fostering partnerships. It is essential that every actor understands their role in ensuring smooth implementation. Today's discussion on climate finance is particularly timely. Just last year, the Rwanda Green Fund celebrated 10 years anniversary, and we are proud of its achievement. On the international stage, however, we still have a long way to go to realize the levels of finance and investment needed to both reduce emissions and, most importantly, adapt to our new climate reality. At the upcoming COP29, we have another historic opportunity to set a climate finance target that meets the moment, one that responds to the acute needs of vulnerable nations and sends a strong signal to the global financial sector and shifts investment decisions in boardrooms and stock exchanges around the world. Nations are also in the process of revising our climate plans, also known as nationally determined contributions, or NDCs. In Rwanda's NDC 3.0, we will raise our ambitions beyond the commitment we set in 2020. with both conditional and unconditional targets. We understand a bold vision for climate action through domestic action with support from international partners, and it is the only way to achieve our goal of being a carbon neutral nation by 2050. In this regard, we also have high hopes and high expectations for major emitters to do the same in their NDC 3.0. Once again, I warmly welcome you all to the Kigali Climate Talks. I look forward to fruitful discussions and look forward to hearing your experiences, best practices, and innovative solutions for climate change adaptation and mitigation. Thank you all for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister, for these insightful remarks. As we focus on climate finance in this second edition, it's vital that Rwanda's NDCs are not just plans, but actions. Achieving our climate goals requires collective efforts from all the sectors, backed by financial resources. Now, I'm honored to welcome Heik Uta Detman, the Ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany to Rwanda. Please make her feel home.
Thank you so much. Honorable Minister of the Environment, dear Dr. Valentine Uma Maria, Honorable EU Ambassador to Rwanda, Estimada Belén, representatives of civil society, academia, the private sector, dear representatives of the Government of Rwanda, and of course of our gracious hosts, the University of Rwanda, dear members of the Diplomatic Corps, fellow development partners, dear panelists, of course, dear all. It's a true pleasure for me to join the Honorable Minister in welcoming you to the second edition of the Kigali Climate Talks. Climate is a global issue. We only live in one world. Health is a global issue. So if I may, Honorable Minister, I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate the Government of Rwanda for taking swift responses and dedication towards a very challenging public health emergency. Thank you very much. And my condolences go to the family and friends of the victims of this, unfortunately, bearing a German name, disease. Back to the climate. When the German embassy in Kigali, and this is thanks to my great team, was upgraded to a climate-focused embassy end of last year, they couldn't get enough, so they started and launched the Kigali Climate Talks together with the Ministry of Environment last May as a new structured and regular format with the aim to foster in-country dialogue and action on international climate discussions, agreements, and obligations. Thank you so much to everyone who makes these climate talks possible. I was honestly a bit shocked when I read that it's only 1 month that we are away from COP29. I mean, the preparations for COP28 are still so livid and so vivid, so I can't believe that a year isn't it? I mean, another year has gone by, and I'm afraid not enough is happening globally, but contrary to global trends, Rwanda is doing a lot. Honorable Minister, we agreed to focus today's session on the topic of climate finance. This is, of course, of high importance, not only internationally, but especially for Rwanda. Climate finance is, and we all know this, is what powers climate action. Heads of state and government, ladies and gentlemen, last week at the Summit for the Future recommitted, yeah? I mean, you commit and then you have to recommit because you're not doing what is necessary. So they recommitted to the Paris Agreement and on reaching an agreement on the new collective quantified goal after 2025 at COP29. The global goal on adaptation, carbon markets, as well as setting up the Loss and Damage Fund are also high on the agenda. And I remember over the last year, I mean, Loss and Damage Fund is always high on the agenda. Yeah, so we have to speed up. All topics relating to climate finance. At the same time in Rwanda, under the leadership of Minecofin, we are also seeing a new impetus for climate finance. A comprehensive climate and nature finance strategy was developed this year and approved by Cabinet in August, if I'm not mistaken. The strategy seeks to capitalize on Rwanda's success in accessing climate finance and considers how the country can evolve its approach to climate and nature resource mobilization amidst changing internal and external conditions. Germany has been honored to work closely with the government of Rwanda on developing this strategy together with the World Bank. Thank you, dear Stella, the chief economist at Minecofin, for being, thank you for being with us against the light. It's always difficult to see people. Thank you so much for being with us today. Feeding into the strategy, a programmatic approach, a carbon market framework, and a green taxonomy have also been developed recently. The establishment of the Climate Finance Department within the Ministry of Finance is another recent development, maintaining the new momentum that will support implementation of its climate targets, the nationally determined contributions, the famous NDCs. Today, the discussion will dive into key questions such as where do we stand internationally on climate finance? What institutions, approaches, and programs have been established in Rwanda on national and on local level? I was really excited to read about the outstanding group of panelists who will be participating in the discussion today. And allow me to highlight another important fact. Germany works a lot in consortium with European partners as Team Europe in Rwanda, but also on the international climate negotiations. So we are practicing a joint EU and member state green diplomacy approach. This is why, dear Belen, I'm even more pleased to have you here with us today. I wish all of you a lively exchange, interesting ideas, maybe dynamic discussions also. And thank you very much. Murakoze cyane.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for this Germany's ongoing support of Rwanda's climate resilience. We are greatly appreciate the German Embassy's role in establishing the Kigali Climate Talks with strengthen our shared commitment to climate action. These discussions are crucial as we address the pressing climate challenges we face. It is now my pleasure to welcome Belen Kalva-Uyara, European Union Ambassador to Rwanda. Team Europe is working side by side with Rwanda to advance our climate resilience, and we are pleased to have you with us today. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So, Honorable Minister, Dr. Valentino Maria, my esteemed colleague, Ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany, Heike, Deputy Director General of the Rwanda Environmental Management Authority and Chief Negotiator on Climate Change, Chief Economist of the Ministry of Finance, the CEO of UNERWA, all dear panelists, members of the private sector, of government, and academics, dear friends of the climate agenda and committed to this joint endeavor. I will start by joining my voice to that of the Ambassador of Germany to point that at a moment of great global challenges where public health and climate belong, we need to congratulate the government for the swift action that has been taken in addressing this outbreak, and we are together, working together in addressing that challenge. And we are here on another global challenge where we are together, where Rwanda is a big player, and where together we can play a bigger role in climate talks globally and also here in Rwanda. So it really is a great pleasure to be here this morning in the Kigali Climate Talks. What a beautiful venue, what a beautiful convening power, having around the table all the key stakeholders from government, from academic, from private sector, from development partners, is such a great opportunity to reflect together on the challenges in Rwanda, in the continent, but globally, and to prepare joint positions and to continue working together in the global agenda. So allow me to give you a little context on where the European Union stands. We held elections in July, and we will soon have a new commission that will be driving the European Union agenda on climate. The President of the European Commission, President von der Leyen, in her political manifesto has restated the commitment of the European Union to engage both internally but globally and continue being a leader on driving the green climate agenda. So we've committed to staying course on the goals that we set in our European Green Deal. The climate crisis is accelerating, so there is an equally urgent need to both decarbonize and industrialize our economy at the same time. So we have made significant progress in setting our climate ambitions, but also we have shown that we can do together, work together in reducing emissions while growing our economy. So our focus will continue to working with companies to scaling up and prioritizing investment in clean energy, infrastructure, and technology, but also to prepare the ways towards the 90% emission reduction target for 2040, which we'll propose to enshrine in our European climate law. So we remain highly committed to continue pushing the agenda with great level of ambition within the European Union. And by leading by example at home, the President of the European Commission wants the EU to remain a leader in international climate change negotiations, building on recent EU initiatives on global issues such as methane, carbon pricing, or global targets for renewables and energy efficiency. So we will set our global climate and energy vision ahead of COP30 in Brazil, and we keep on committing in preparing for the COP29 in a month's time, as we've said. The topic of the conversation this morning is finance. Is finance to power the adaptation, to continue powering resilience. So COP28 make a significant progress by agreeing and establishing the Loss and Damage Fund, for which the European Union was one of the key leaders, and together with the EU member states, to 2/3 of the initial funding pledges. But now we look forward to COP29, which will become, and where we see that climate finance, it's not just about meeting the climate finance targets that we all set, but it's about the action, and it's about integrating the climate in our funding processes, in our global policies. And for this, we need to welcome the efforts of the government of Rwanda, both in strategy and systems. In the strategy that my colleague, the ambassador, mentioned, but also. So at COP29, government must establish a new climate finance goal reflecting the scale and the urgencies of the climate challenge. And looking forward, the EU will engage constructively in the deliberations on the post-2025 new collective quantified goal under the Paris Agreement. We remain committed to this agenda. We continue to show the leadership by delivering in action. So to conclude, this is a clear joint commitment to engage on a global challenge by setting in this space some clear guidance in moving forward on this climate agenda. So Murakosechane, great deliberations with these great panelists that will be here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for these insight words. So we are now have the chance to hear from one of our panelists before we go to panel. We're going to hear a presentation on the state of finance climate negotiations, which will provide insights into the current global discussions and the implication for our climate goals. This is a valuable opportunity to understand how these negotiations can impact Rwanda's efforts in addressing climate change. Please welcome the Deputy Director General of the Rwanda Environment Management Authority, Faustin Munyazikwiye, for the presentation.
Honorable Minister and guests of honor, Excellency ambassadors here present, all protocol observed, good morning. As highlighted by moderator, I'm Faustin Munyazikwiye. I'm the Deputy Director General of Rwanda Environment Management Authority and also climate lead negotiator for the country. So my role today is to take you through the status of our climate finance negotiation as of now, as of today. When we are in the negotiations, there are a lot of items to be negotiated, but we tried our best to focus on those ones which are linked to the theme of today. Honorable Minister, to present the status of negotiations, allow me first of all to trace the history of climate negotiations and mention some of the key milestones, at least for those who are in the room who are not familiar with the climate change negotiations. So the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which is in UNFCCC, was adopted in 1992 during the Rio de Janeiro, and it came into force in 1994. Adoption is one thing, but meeting the requirement of being into force is another key milestone. So after 2 years, that's when all countries adopted the UNFCCC, fulfilled the requirements after ratifying the convention, fulfilled the requirement to be into force. In 1995, after just 1 year, that's when when the world convened the first conference of the parties in Bahrain. As stipulated in the convention, you can't convene a conference of the parties while the convention is not yet into force. That's why it was adopted in 92 and then waited to 95 to convene the first conference of the parties. In 1997, the world adopted the Kyoto Protocol which is legally binding treaty or protocol, especially binded developed countries to emission reduction targets. Having a framework convention was not enough because the framework convention was not legally binding. That's why the parties negotiated the Kyoto Protocol. The Kyoto Protocol gave emission reduction targets to developed countries with the baseline of 1990. Taking the emissions you had in 1990, and then they give you targets from there. Because of the nature of this Kyoto Protocol, of giving targets to developed countries, it was not first accommodated by those ones who were targeted, especially developed countries. That's why you can see that it was entered into force in 2005, after 8 years. So it was adopted in 97, and Kyoto Protocol was only entered into force in 2005 because we wanted to have more ratification, especially for developed countries who have emissions, so many emissions. And that's why after even being adopted, being into force, most of the developed countries, after failing to abide to the targets, they withdraw from the Kyoto Protocol. In 2015, the world changed the direction and adopted the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement was negotiated since 2009 after Copenhagen Accord, and then it was only adopted in 2015. So after 6 years of intense negotiations, we adopted the Paris Agreement. But what was the difference between the Paris Agreement and the Kyoto Protocol? As highlighted, the Kyoto Protocol was somehow a top-down approach, where at convention level, we give emission targets for reduction to countries, which didn't work well. Then in the Paris Agreement, we changed the approach. Then it was somehow bottom-up, where countries have the responsibility to submit their contribution, what they can afford to contribute in terms of emission reduction through their nationally determined contribution. Then it was also not easy, the adoption of the Paris Agreement. The ultimate goal of the Paris Agreement is to reduce the increase of mean temperature to 2 degrees Celsius, but with the efforts to reach 1.5 degrees Celsius. So most of developing countries wanted to limit to 1.5 degrees Celsius because of its implication. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, known as IPCC, have developed a standalone report on implication of limiting to 1.5 degrees Celsius, and indicated that with that increase, we are seeing some of the islands disappearing because of increasing the level of the sea. So we we are going to resume this presentation after a group photo with the ministers and the guests of honors who are leaving for another urgent meeting. I will try my best to be first. Yeah. All panelists and guests of honor, please join the front so that we can take a photo before you leave. Thank you very much. We can now resume our presentation. Just to lay the foundation for the next panel. I was saying that I was trying to show the difference between the major difference between the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Agreement, where in the Paris Agreement, countries were requested to submit their contribution through NDCs. Then, after 6 years, in 2021, at COP26 in Glasgow, that's when we agreed on the Paris Rulebook, which is the implementation framework of the Paris Agreement. After adoption of the Paris Agreement in 2015, most of the key elements of the Paris Agreement were not, their details were not agreed, and we started a round of negotiations. One of the overarching items on the Paris Rulebook was the carbon market framework, the implementation of the Article 6 itself. We had a round of negotiations so that we can at least complete all the elements of the Paris Rulebook. So that's why it took 6 years. The Paris Agreement was adopted in 2015, and then the Paris implementation framework, which is the rule book, was adopted in 2021 at COP26. Then at COP27 in 2022 in Sharm el-Sheikh, there was another clear milestone, which the adoption of Loss and Damage Fund, which was established. It was a tough fight to have a loss and damage fund, especially for small island states and least developed countries, to make a case to differentiate the adaptation and loss and damage. Because since time immemorial, developing countries have been facing various climate change impacts, and we incurred so many losses and damage. So it was a clear milestone in the world to establish the Loss and Damage Fund in 22 at COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh. Then last year, in 2023, at COP28 in Dubai, the first global stocktake was conducted. In the Paris Agreement, it was provided that every 5 years, countries at higher level, at head of states level, they will be evaluating the progress of the implementation of Paris Agreement and give guidance. So the first ever global stocktake took place last year and indicated that the targets we have, what we submitted through our NDCs, are not in line with the Paris Agreement overarching objective, which is limiting increase of temperature to 2 degrees Celsius with the effort to reach 1.5 degrees Celsius. So they call, there was a call for all state and non-state actors to raise their ambition so that we can align our plans with the science, what science is telling us. But indeed, apart from the global goal, we had also another milestone on adopting the global goal on adaptation, which was also another area which is at the interest of developing countries. Adaptation is at the heart of our development. We can't think about development without integrating the externalities of climate change, without thinking about reducing vulnerability of our sectors. As you all know, when you are relying to agriculture, which is rain-fed agriculture, then you need to take into consideration those externalities. So having a common metric of assessing the efforts of the world in terms of adaptation, it was a very success because we had various approach of assessing. Some of the partners were assessing adaptation in terms of the cost incurred. Others were assessing it in terms of the poverty reduction. So we had, it was also a key milestone to agree on global goal on adaptation. Last but not least is about the transition from fossil fuel to renewables, where last year we agreed that the world, we are going to triple the renewable energy capacity by 2030. So that's also another clear milestone in the way of phasing out. So we are now heading to Baku. As Excellency Ambassador said and Honorable Minister, the Baku is a climate finance COP. We are expecting a lot on climate finance. After that, after tracing the background, what are the key areas or key climate negotiation issues? First and foremost is climate finance. In the convention and in the Paris Agreement, it is highlighted that developed countries has the responsibility to avail climate finance. But what is climate finance? do we have a common definition of climate finance, or we are just gathering all development ODAs and other ordinary funding, and we call them climate finance. We are also looking at emission reduction targets. Through our NDC, we have, all countries have portrayed their target, but as highlighted in the global stocktake, we need to raise ambition. How do we raise ambition? How do we first focus for those big emitters and raise their ambition so that it can have an impact? But how do we also, as less emitters like Rwanda, preach by example, even though we don't have emissions, a lot of emissions, we pledged to reduce 38% of our emissions, which is very much. So that's a key issue for negotiation. Another area is transparency and accountability. After changing the approach from bottom up, which is in our NDCs, we have to agree on the common metrics of monitoring, MRV monitoring, reporting, and verification, so that we can know if we are on track or not. The fourth element is on loss and damage, which is very pertinent for LDCs and seeds. We have common carbon market, which is also another area of getting additional climate finance resources, but at the expenses of course, investing in the actions which are helping us to reduce emissions. Fossil fuel subsidies, as highlighted, there was a clear milestone of tripling the renewable energy by 2030, but how do we how do we domesticate those decisions into our policies and strategies at country level? Then we have adaptation measures, where we have a global goal on adaptation, but on the other hand, the COP26, which took place in Glasgow, also adopted a decision of doubling the climate finance for adaptation. But adopting it is one thing, and availing those resources in a way that they are doubled, it's another thing which need to be discussed again. Honorable Minister, climate finance negotiation at COP29, what are we going to focus on? COP29 has become known as the Finance COP. Why are we nicknaming it Finance COP? We have expectation of setting a global climate finance target, which is known as new collective quantified goal on climate finance. This is a target which will replace a 2009 target of availing 100 billion by 2020. But having that agreeing on that new quantified goal on climate finance, it's not an easy task. We are discussing mainly on 4 issues. One is on the quantum. How much do we need? We had the experience of 100 billion which came from nowhere. But the discussion of today, we are saying, let's make sure that the new quantum is addressing the needs of developing countries. The second element we are discussing is the quality. When you are talking about the quality, it comes back to the definition of climate finance. If we are saying that climate finance needs to be additional and predictable, we need to mean it in a new quantified goal. We need to justify that additionality, not just taking any funding which is coming in the developed countries and calling it a climate finance. As you all know, developed world failed to fulfill even the 100 billion. It was only last year when the report was indicating that now the 100 billion is met. Even if the report, we have other reports which are challenging that report, OECD report. But at least now we have a common ground that it is met. But we need to avoid this in the new quantified goal. Another third element is the source of funding. It is very clear in the climate change, in the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Paris Agreement, that the developed countries must avail resources. But the discussion of today, they are pulling even beneficiaries to be the contributors. To be the contributors at the end of the day benefit to the climate finance. So we are discussing on the source where we are advocating that we need to focus on grant and the higher concession loans instead of keeping adding the burden to developing countries, especially on their debt. Then the last but not least is the contributors. Who should contribute to that new quantified goal? So looking at the four elements, we have had 6 technical dialogue TEDs, and we have now, they started with 400-page of summary. Now we are at least at 31-page of a summary indicating positions of different countries and different constituencies. So as you can see, Baku will be dominated by that discussion. That's why it was nicknamed Climate Finance COP. Honorable Minister, we are also going to focus on growing the loss and damage fund. After establishing the fund, after having a contribution to that fund, we need to make sure that the loss and damage fund is meeting the requirements and the needs of developing world. We saw 772 million pledge last year, but that's a drop in the ocean. Taking into consideration the needs of developed countries. Scaling up climate finance, we are talking about doubling climate finance for adaptation. How do we measure that? How do we take into consideration in different funding arrangements we have in Green Climate Fund, in Loss and Damage Fund, in different funding mechanisms you have? How do we take into consideration that decision of doubling climate adaptation funding? Next will be, again, our goal for COP29 in Baku. Climate finance, as highlighted, is one of the overarching priorities, especially on new collective quantified goal, where Africa is saying 1.3 trillion, others are having other figures, but we need to have principles which will guide this quantum. As highlighted, we need to focus on the needs. More ambitious national climate action. All countries are supposed to submit their revised NDC next year. So this is a high time to call upon all developed countries to raise their ambition. At Baku, the COP is starting on 11th, but 12 and 13, we have Head of State Summit, which will focus on how do we raise ambition of countries so that we can meet at least the requirements and the analysis done at Global Stock last year. Accelerating adaptation efforts and finance need to match, then loss and damage as highlighted. Honorable Minister, as I said, there is a lot of items to negotiate on, but those are the main ones which are related to climate finance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Faustin, for this good presentation. So I hope it inspires us as we move into our next session at the panel. So now we have reached the discussion part of our event. We are privileged to have speakers who will talk about how climate finance can support Rwanda's effort to adapt and become more resilient to climate change. So each speaker has valuable knowledge and experience to share, and they will help us understand what is needed to reach our climate goals. So we look forward to great conversation about how Rwanda can improve its climate action with the right investment and partnership. So I would like to welcome our speakers. Faustin Munyazikwiye, the Deputy Director of REMA, welcome to the panel. Stella Nteziryayo, she's the Chief Economist of Finance and Economic Planning. Welcome to the stage. Dominique Habimana, he's the Secretary General of RALGA. RALGA is a Rwanda Association for Local Government Authorities. Welcome, Dominique. And the last, not the least, Dr. Emet Sinda, Associate Professor of the Environment Science at the University of Rwanda. And of course, I'm really happy to be the moderator of this session. Thank you. So, sorry, Amparo. We welcome Amparo Gonzalez Diaz. She's the team leader for Rural Development, Climate Action, and Environment in the EU delegation. So I will start with Faustin, because he's one who is near to me. Rwanda is utilizing climate finance to carry out vulnerability assessment and implement adaptation projects, which are crucial for building resilience. The early presentation that you did on the state of climate finance negotiations highlighted the importance of these efforts. So what are the key areas in Rwanda vulnerability assessment, and in what ways in climate finance being leveraged to effectively address these vulnerabilities? Foster.
Thank you very much, moderator, for this question. The government of Rwanda, through the Ministry of Environment and REMA, we normally conduct the climate change vulnerability assessment report every 5 years. But those efforts are geared to measure if the efforts the government and partners are putting in the development of our country are also helping us to reduce vulnerability. The last vulnerability report we conducted was at the end of the EDPRS 2, 2018, and portrayed that we do the census all over the country, and portrayed that the Western province is highly vulnerable to climate change with 0.5 index. So the highest index is 1. So the more the index is high, the more it is approaching 1, it's more vulnerable. But before that, we have also conducted vulnerability assessment all over the country, and the country is divided into 2. There is areas which are prone to drought, which is mainly the eastern part of our country, and also the south east part, which is called the Mayaga of our country. And there is also another part which is prone to floods and landslide, which is mainly the western part and the northern part. But how do we use the data we have? How do you use those findings? First of all, to make a case of mobilizing climate finance to come and help to reduce or to climate-proof various sectors. So the first and foremost is that we conduct those studies so that we can, first of all, make a case and mobilize additional resources. Second, we conduct those vulnerability assessment reports so that our decision makers can take informed decisions. We are in the process of developing our planning for next 5 years, but the efforts we need to put in Eastern Province need to be in line with the vulnerability of the eastern part. The efforts and programs we need to orient in the western part of our country need also to be in line with what we are be in line with the findings of those reports. As the question, first we need to make a case for additional resources. Second, we need to have informed decisions. Last but not least, we need to have basis of monitoring and evaluation of the efforts we are investing in. We need to know, is the funding we are putting solving the issue, or it's just a drop in the ocean? Thank you.
Thank you. Stella, climate finance is essential for funding projects that enable Rwanda to adapt and withstand the impact of climate change. So the Ministry of Finance plays a pivotal role in the management to manage these funds effectively. So how Rwanda is integrating climate finance into its national strategy to address adaptation needs, and what new financial mechanisms are being developed to support these goals. I will also like to ask you to talk about the new climate finance strategy a little bit at the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Basile. Those are many questions. I'll try to be very brief,
Yes.
given 3 minutes. But they're also important questions. And also allow me to also thank the organizing team, the Ministry of Environment, as well as the German Embassy for organizing these talks, but most importantly, the fact that we have a platform where we can discuss these issues. So to respond to your question, just to give context, the reason why the Ministry of Finance has a role to play in terms of climate finance, it may be obvious, but at the same time, I think we need to make sure that everyone understands why we play this role. When you look at the different initiatives that are in place, there is the Vision 2050 as a country that we have. We have the NST2 that was recently launched by Right Honorable Prime Minister. We also have different strategy like the Green Growth Climate Resilience Strategy. We have the National Environmental Strategy, the National Biodiversity Strategy. So when you look at all those efforts, Rwanda is quite advanced in terms of taking action towards climate and nature. But at the same time, Rwanda is not the first country which emits a lot of gas around the world. But yet, it's a country which is impacted by the action of climate change. And there are many examples that we can think about, starting with the flood that happened last year, which took a lot of lives of our population. But there is also, when you look at agriculture, the fact that a large share of the population depends on agriculture, and whenever there is drought, the impact that it has on inflation, but also on lives of the population. So all that gives us conscience to take a very bold action as Ministry of Finance, but also as government entirely, to make sure that we take care of the lives of our population. So climate is not just about discussions and being fancy, because that's what sometimes people think, but it's actually real, and it's actually touching the lives of people. So all that happens, when you come now to the tool that the government has, which is the budget, to be able to cater for all those needs, it has a very severe impact on the budget. And the impact is so negative that if we don't take an action very quickly, it's going to be worse. So that's why I wanted to give that context so that you understand why we are making all these reforms as a government, but more specifically as Ministry of Finance. And that's how came up the idea of coming up with the climate and nature finance strategy, with the support, of course, of the German government through KfW, but also the World Bank, with the program that we have under the development and policy operation. It is extremely urgent not only to continue what we've been doing, which is extremely important and very quite advanced in terms of the actions that we are taking, but also boosting all the efforts. And as Minecofin, our role is to make sure that we put together all those initiatives and make sure that we raise financing, sizable financing, by the way. Sizable financing, and very quickly, and sustainable finance. Starting with, of course, domestic resource mobilization,
looking at what we can do in terms of local currency financing before we even think of external financing, which is also quite limited. But if we think about it in an innovative way, we are able to blend and be able to tap into the different type of financing that are available. So the climate and nature finance is helping us to put in perspective all those efforts, starting with the mobilization, making sure that we take advantage of innovation, innovative finance, making sure that we are able to actually see the impact of the money that we are putting into the different projects and programs that we're implementing. And all that will help us to be able to achieve our goals and actually reduce the impact that we see on our economy. We've recently made a study and we've seen that we are losing about 3 to 5% of GDP whenever we don't take an action about climate. So that's why we took the deliberate action to come up with the strategy. Let's do something about it. Let's have a structure within the ministry that will follow up on those initiatives. And then let's see how far we go in terms of the impact. The other question?
That's where the new climate finance strategy came in?
Yes. So the new climate finance strategy was designed, I mentioned, with the support of the World Bank and the German government through KfW. It was recently approved by the cabinet. And we also intend to launch it officially very soon. And the idea is, ahead of the COP29, to be able to send a signal to investors and people who would like to take the bet of that journey with us as Rwanda, to tell them that we are ready. We have systems in place. We have ways of accounting for every single money that goes into different projects and make sure that we see the impact of climate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dominique. Local governments are key to implement NDCs, but integrating climate action into district planning and budgeting remains a challenge. So with support from the Ministry of Environment and the Germany Development Agency, district staff capacity has improved, but more resources are needed. So how your institution, RADGA, ensure climate action is fully integrated into district plans and budgets, and that more resources are allocated to this priority?
Thank you very much, Basil. And I also want to start by thanking the organizers, the German Embassy and the Ministry of Environment, for thinking about local governments and giving them this opportunity to participate in this discussion. RALGA, the Association of Districts in the city of Kigali, is of course pleased to take part in such discussions on the question of how do we ensure that climate finance reaches the local level. Because it's a key question. The needs are evident. In preparation of this, I spoke to a number of districts' mayors, and they list, the many things actually that they have to address which are related to climate change. The floods, the drought, famine that comes with the needs to, even to the level of actually conflicts that may arise, from climate change, gender aspects. And it's important that we reflect on how we bring climate finance to the local level. The good thing is that finance management capacities have improved significantly at the local level. The district public finance management capacities have increased, as evidenced by the recent reports, clean audits, and the level of implementation of the Auditor General's recommendation. And this is very important because it means that the districts can be trusted, that they can manage finance funds. And this, for me, I think this was an important first step to really raise the confidence level that the districts are capable of managing the funds. And here I want to thank the Ministry of Finance and also the German Embassy with whom we work with to address this, to build the capacities of districts in finance management. So what we do, I would say briefly that is in two areas. One is the representation and advocacy. And second is capacity building. On representation and advocacy is to ensure that the local government voice is heard in fora such as this, but also in the other spaces where finance and climate solutions are negotiated. So RALGA participates in the COP, but we're also a member of different other bodies, associations like ICLAY and the others, and with the goal to ensure that the discussion on climate finance, climate solutions, that reflects also the needs of the local level. And number two, on capacity building, one, of course, I talked about the PFM capacities, but also the technical capacities in terms of project development and management. And this is the area where the districts still have gaps, because climate is also a specialized area. And the need is to be able to develop, to conceive bankable projects that can meet the requirements, and when they get the funding, be able to actually implement those projects properly and account and report on this, because the requirements around this funding can also be complicated. So what RALGA is doing is also supporting the districts and the project development capacities, but also to accompany them during the project implementation. So we have the good example of Nyamagabe district, yes, where we started working with them on the initial proposals. At the first attempt did not go through, but progressively the second attempt succeeded, and we want to emulate this model also to the other districts. And I thank also the Green Fund, FONERWA, and the other stakeholders with whom we work on this. I would say this is maybe what is most important in supporting them. But also, lastly, we have also specific projects. For instance, now we have projects working with the secondary cities and satellite cities, because they have a big role to embark on implementing the master plans, developing the physical plans, coming up with the participatory and inclusive approaches in urbanization. And we also develop specific projects, to address specific needs of given districts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dominique. Aimé, the climate research and accurate data seems to be essential in informing the identification of fit-for-purpose climate action measures for effectively implementing and evaluating climate finance projects. So what role do research and data play in implementing and assessing climate finance to improve its effectiveness for adaptation and resilience goals?
Yeah,
So
thank you.
try to be closer to the microphone so that the voice will...
Sure.
Thank
so,
you.
Thank you, moderator. It is indeed true that data and research are crucial for strategic planning, implementation, and even evaluation for climate finance. So this role needed to be understood from 2 or 3 perspectives. First, data and research are strongly linked. And it is important to maybe to describe the availability of data in Rwanda, even before discussing its role in the fit-purpose intervention. There is a common perception that Rwanda lacks sufficient comprehensive data, but this is not accurate. I have been working with different institutions here in Rwanda on various studies, and I have noted that actually Rwanda has a robust and comprehensive data. But of course there is a challenge because the data are somehow scattered, sometimes fragmented, which can even limit, for example, the access. But if really you wanted to use data in the context of Rwanda, you need really to map clearly what you need and the potential source of data. 2, data, I think 2 of the 4 objectives of this upcoming COP29 will be focusing on scaling up adaptation effort and climate finance. However, these 2 goals cannot be achieved without evidence-based research that can easily identify where, for example, climate finance is most needed. In the context of Rwanda, for example, this vulnerability assessment that we are talking about, even the, what we call the disaster risk efforts, can help to maybe to show where the issues are. But this assessment, when it comes to implementing and assessing, for example, the adaptation project or initiatives, this vulnerability assessment needed to be complemented by dive deep case studies, often coming from the high impact journal articles, and these are coming from the academia, from research, that can inform, for example, to test whether the adaptation, the impact of interventions, for example, identifying, for example, the gaps for improvement, but more importantly, and this is very important, share suitable practices or good fit, not best practices, because what works in one community might not work in another community. Lastly, the learning component. We often implement activities, but we don't maybe go back and learn from what we are doing. So there is a need to shift from output-based to the outcome, for example, by using some qualitative insight if you really wanted to measure the outcome and the impact. And this can be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Aime. Amparo, following the EU elections and the constitution of a new commission of the period of 5 years, from now to 2029, which will be the place of the EU green transition policies?
Thank you for the question. It's not an easy one. I'm not a commissioner, but I can talk about the things I know. What I know is that our objectives of becoming carbon neutral by 2050 and of a net greenhouse emissions reduction of 55% by 2030 are set in a legal framework in the EU climate law. So it is challenging. I would expect that we cannot abide to that, and I would expect the Commission, the EU, upholding these objectives. There are two key processes to follow up as of now. One is a follow-up on a Commission's report early this year, where it was based on an assessment by experts. It was recommending, the Commission is recommending to adhere to a 90% reduction of emissions by 2040, what we call the 2040 target. So this is a report. The Commission will make a proposal, and following the EU climate law provisions, we will need to discuss this with Member States and the European Parliament. So this is a key process. If this 2040 target is adopted, and then comes the second key process, we will need to see how to reflect this in the new national determined contributions for the EU. We have to deliver, as other signatories of the Paris Agreement, on the new NDCs ahead of COP30, and this should be done as early as possible in 2025. So these are the two key processes. I don't have la boule de cristal, but I would assume that we will continue having very ambitious targets. Then maybe an important point to make is that in terms of our bilateral cooperation with partner countries, and Rwanda, we are going to continue delivering on the climate targets we set. We are not going to stop with that. So we have a programming process that goes up to 2027, where climate action fits very high on the agenda, and we will continue delivering on that and trying to follow a Team Europe comprehensive approach. I am currently, with other EU member states, responsible for delivering on a 380 million euros response to provide climate resilience in rural areas with a focus on agriculture. We will continue delivering on that. We are not going to change our approach. I think it is also key, there are two areas that are key for us, is the industries. We need to somehow, industries and agriculture. For industries, we need to convince private sector that being clean is a competitiveness trademark. Being clean is not a liability. So this is part of the dialogue. And for agriculture, which traditionally has benefited from large amounts, and also in Rwanda, I think in the NDCs, adaptation in agriculture amounts for more than 60% of the adaptation target. So agriculture is seen as a sector that is a victim of climate, but it is also an emitter. So we also need to set emission targets for agriculture. These are the two sectors for us, and we will continue working on that. Just my last comment would be, we are very pleased to see how NST2 and some sector strategies, I'm thinking of the PSTF5, the agri-sector strategy, are including climate action targets. And this is, I think, very relevant. And we congratulate Government of Rwanda and partners on this achievement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Back to Faustin, and thank you for talking about Rwanda's vulnerability. But how are vulnerability assessment being used to shape Rwanda's climate finance strategy? And how do these assessments help direct resources to most crucial adaptation projects?
Thank you very much again, moderator. It's really a tough and challenging question. How do we make sure that we direct funding and finance to the areas which needs particular attention. To respond to that, maybe let me use some of the concrete examples. We conducted the vulnerability assessment, and we portrayed that the most affected sector in this country is the agriculture sector, because the agriculture sector, as highlighted, is rain-fed agriculture, and also depending to the two zones I talked about. One zone which is prone to drought, there is a direct impact on agriculture, and also the zone which is more likely to be impacted by the landslide and floods. There is also a direct impact on the loss of agriculture production. So we have also conducted the technology need assessment, climate change technology need assessment in agriculture sector, and we came up with 5 main technology which can help us to adapt to climate change. In the results to orient, that's why I wanted to use some of the practical examples. The recent PSTR 5 development and the NST2 development highlighted that the investment targeting the irrigation is going to be increased, and we are going to increase the irrigation land from 71,000 hectares to 130,000 hectares. This means a lot. It's like doubling the size of irrigated land. But in our Vision 2050, we have an ambitious target of irrigating around 600,000 hectares. So this speaks a volume, and this responds to the assessments we have been conducting. So this means that the government realized that we can't keep business as usual without taking into consideration those externalities. Another concrete example is that in NST2, in 5 years to come, we are going to increase radical terraces from 152,000 to 160,000 hectares. As I said, when you look at the western part of our country, where the slope is very high, so we need to make sure that we climate-proof the agriculture we have there. We need to make sure that we have adequate measures of erosion control so that we reduce the vulnerability of that sector. So that's one of the examples of the sectors I just took to show you how the government of Rwanda, through the Ministry of Finance, are directing the efforts towards where we have issues. Another clear and vivid example is Rwanda Green Fund. When they are doing the call for proposal, they do targeted call for proposal, sometimes for NGOs, sometimes for government institutions. But when you look at the criteria, when you look at the priorities they want to address, definitely they are aligned with the findings of some of those assessments I talked about. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Stella, the new organization structure of Minecofin includes a climate finance department. Can you please commend the Minecofin for this? It's really good for the sector. So can you share details on the responsibilities and vision for it, and how do you foresee the different the different Rwanda institutions involved in climate finance working together.
Yes, thank you very much, Basil. I think we should congratulate the entire government for taking this decision. Because it was more than, it was the time to have such a department within the ministry. And looking at what has been already done in Rwanda, this department will just try to cement all the efforts that have been already taken. And in terms of how it's going to be working, first of all, making sure that all the departments within the ministry are aligned for us to be able to achieve the goals that we set ourselves in terms of climate, but also with other institutions and different agencies. It will start with the tool that it has within the ministry, looking at the whole PFM cycle. When you start by looking at the macro and fiscal planning of how we take into account climate and nature into our planning, making sure that we have, first of all, the fiscal space of doing what we are talking about. And of course, the department will be closely working with the macro, the tax department, but also the planning, the budget, and also going into the planning and budgeting process, making sure that as we have the climate, the green growth and climate resilience strategy, all the sectors, economic sectors within Rwanda, whatever project and programs that they're implementing are well coordinated and is consistent with the means that we have. Then we go to allocation of budget. Once we know what we need to do, we have the climate budget tagging process that was institutionalized within the budget department, which will also help to see in terms of allocating money, what money goes to adaptation, mitigation, to both, or none of the two. But again, also coming to the issue of monitoring and evaluation and looking at the impact of what we have invested in. So this department will be trying to make sure that all that is giving the impact that it needs to give, and there will be also different committees that will be set to be able to implement that and follow up on those actions and make sure that at the end of the day we have the impact that we are expecting. So that's what I can comment for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The time is not on our side, and we have the audience that will maybe ask questions. Allow me to go to the audience. Before the Q&A, I would like to, if the handheld microphone is nearby the two persons I want to point out. We are in the room with Zaina Amri-Swed. She's the Chief of Staff at the BK, Bank of Kigali. So the private banking sector plays an important role in financing climate-related projects. So listening to the panelists, what would be your reaction to what you heard from the perspective of the banking sector, Zaina? Yes.
Thank you very much, Basil. Hello, everyone. Happy to be here today. So I would say that from the panel discussion, my favorite sentence today is being clean is not a liability, that it's actually a competitive advantage. I think I'm going to take this back to the Bank of Kigali offices. So, I mean, a few years ago, when I look at the evolution of these discussions, it was always a topic of public sector to some extent. And of course, it was also a topic of experts with the environment jargon, that we now use, actually, in the banking sector, thanks to the evolution of knowledge and awareness. So, by listening to Stella, for example, she speaks a language that bankers understand, that the private sector understands, and I think I commend the entire government for all the work that has been done in putting in place the roadmaps, the strategies, because it allows us to know where we fall and where we're supposed to play our pivotal role. As Bank of Kigali in particular, I can say that we're progressively aligning to the bigger goal or the greater goal of the green agenda. Of course, there's two sides of it. We need to be able to do well by the impact, by our stakeholders, by supporting our clients, but we also need to know internally how to do it. So I would say that in the past year, for example, we've leveraged our partnerships in order to mobilize funds that go specifically to the, to the resilience and the adaptation of climate. So for example, our recent partnership with EIB, the European Investment Bank, which should be unlocking 100 million euros specifically for the green agriculture value chain. And 30% of that will go to climate action. So this is what we've been leveraging on. On the part where we need to know how to do it, again, I think partnership is everything on this journey. So we've leveraged with different partners, for example, the Agence Française du Développement, that has been helping us in creating a climate action plan to know what do we do in the next year or 2 or 3 in order to do it well for the market and to be that bridge that can be a catalyst for the green agenda. So I think maybe it encompasses any other questions you may have had, but I think it's very hopeful. It gives us comfort of what's ahead, at least on the private sector perspective. And I think what I would encourage as well is to always invite us, not just the bank, not just the financial system, but ultimately the final beneficiary of all these partnerships, to the talks, to the discussions, in order to be able to work hand in hand. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zaina. I don't want that microphone to go far from this first line because I have a question for Teddy. Rwanda Green Fund, Teddy, she's the CEO of Rwanda Green Fund. That fund has been the leading Rwanda public institution mobilizing climate finance for the past 10 years. Listening to the panelists as well, I would like you to elaborate on this. How does Rwanda Green Fund mobilize climate finance, and what are the key success stories so far? Where do you see climate finance headed in Rwanda for the next 10 years? Because we are celebrating 10 years. Thank you, Teddy. Yes.
Thank you, Basil. Those are a lot of questions, but it's good that you had already sent them ahead of time. Honorable Minister, colleagues, it's really exciting to be here today listening to our distinguished panelists, because when you look at the evolution of climate finance, I think in the beginning it was really a conversation of the environment and not so much, having the Ministry of Finance talk about it, and like Zaina said, the private sector. So I really have to say that, not to brag, but as Government of Rwanda, we've done a very good job of really bringing this topic, working closely with our development partners, but also adopting a whole government approach. So if I could just reflect on, so just for example, starting with what Stella said, the chief economist, I think we do acknowledge that addressing climate change is a no-brainer. I mean, if 3 to 5% of the GDP loss is caused by climate change, then it's really important that I think as a whole, as all the different sectors come together to address this issue. So then there was also Ralga, you talked about bringing climate finance to the local level, and I think here I'll now bring on the fund and why the fund was established in the first place. So as everybody highlighted, Rwanda is very ambitious, very in terms of addressing climate change. But we also see the need to develop in a climate-compatible way. So we don't have to choose between the two. We can't choose between economic development versus climate because, again, the two are very closely aligned. So the policy framework, regulations, a lot of strategies were in place. But then there was a realization that you can only have great policies and strategies, but if you don't have the financing, then how are we going to translate all of this into action? So that's why the Rwanda Green Fund was created to act as a financing vehicle that can really position Rwanda to attract both funds through bilateral cooperation as well as multilaterals. So that's what we've been doing. Basically, the fund was established in a basket fund way, where we approach different partners. Very happy to be here. Right now, the German government through KfW are our biggest, funders, but we also have the likes of FCDO, CIDA. But the whole idea was to say we're going to create a basket fund that sets clear goals and priorities that are aligned to national priorities. So everything we're doing is aligned to NST2. But when the partners also come on board, they come to also fund the national priorities that we've all agreed upon. And so this was really the whole thinking behind. But just to maybe quickly, so then comes bringing the funding to the local level. So I would say that what's really ideal about the fund is that we're able to both invest in both public and the private sector. So through grant financing, our biggest portion actually has been going to the local government, but we also have instruments that can allow us to invest in the private sector. And just wanted to commend really that we have seen a great improvement in the local government. So through our NDC facility, this is a facility that was launched at COP. I've started losing track of COPs. COP 27. Yes, COP27. Yes. So this was a facility that was launched at COP27 with the support of the German government. And just about a few months back, we're about to fund 10 projects worth 43 billion worth of Rwandan francs, and 6 of those are actually from the local government. So I think really just to commend that we are also seeing an improvement in the districts. So quickly, if I can, I think for me the biggest reflection I want to make today is that, when we look at the needs, the climate finance needs, and of course we do appreciate our partners because we wouldn't have reached thus far if it wasn't for the great partnerships that we have and being able to mobilize resources. However, I think we have to start thinking beyond traditional development finance. And I mean, the traditional development finance is very important, but it's also great that we start, and it's good to have the private sector here on board, but it's really important that as we're now we start planning for NST2, I believe there's also a very clear target. We have to mobilize 3 billion in this next 5-year period of NST2. We have to think of, yes, we have to continue working with our development partners, mobilizing grants. We want concession of financing, but we also have to leverage the private sector. So I think for me, that's the key thing. And just to put this into perspective, the fund was established in 2012, and I would say that mobilization started in 2013. It took about 10 years to mobilize close to 300 million. But if I can just give you an example of, for example, what we did with Ireme Invest, this was a financing facility where it's a financing facility that's focused on private sector, where it's a partnership between the fund and the Development Bank of Rwanda. We managed to mobilize over 200 million in 1.5 years. So I think this is something that I just wanted to put here, is that let's really think of how do we, because there isn't going to be sufficient public funds, but of course the public finance is also necessary, especially when it comes to de-risking, when it comes, some of the projects are also public good in nature, but I think it's really important that as we start planning the next 5 years, and even what we've, from what Faustin was telling us, there's commitments that happen, but in reality, when it comes to these funds flowing, it's very slow. So I also think that we have to really start positioning ourselves to attract private sector finance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Teddy. So now the floor is open for the audience. We'll take a couple of 3 questions. And for those who are following us online, please use the chat feature for the questions. You can write your questions and it will be responded here. So we'll take 3 from the audience. Introduce yourself, where you come from, and if you want to direct the question to one of the panelists, it will be easy for us. Yes, in the middle, gentlemen.
Thank you very much. My name is Philbert Nsengiyumva. I work for GIZ Rwanda in Decentralization and Good Governance Program. We, through the Ministry of Environment, are supporting districts in mainstreaming NDCs into their DDSs. In fact, we are still doing it. And I was very happy to hear from Rariga that they are keen to support the project development and implementation, because that is indeed what is following after the DDSs are established. So, but at local level, I'd like to know, maybe from Rariga, talking of domestic fund mobilization, how do you intend to monitor or track funds from local stakeholders? We have platforms at district levels who actually provide a lot of funds through CSOs, NGOs, private sector, and all that. So do we have an instrument that track funds for all those people? Because I think they can be a lot and they can contribute significantly to the 11 billion of NDCs. But most importantly, because when talk about finance, it's not only cash. Maybe we have in-kind contribution. Communities at local levels, they do a lot in climate change adaptation. Probably for themselves, but they still do a lot. So how do we actually quantify that, translate that into monetary value, and we say this is how much community contribute? And a question to the Chief Finance, maybe you may do that already, but is there a way you actually quantify at annual basis the percentage of climate contribution by the national budget, the percentage, the national budget of the climate finance, as you contribute to the NDCs implementation? Thank you.
Thank you, Philbert. So if there's not anyone who, yes.
Thank you.
So
can
you please stand up for the audience to, thank you.
Thank you, Basil. I'm Francis Kayumba from Vanguard Economics. It's a research and advisory company working in Rwanda. Mine just goes to the critical part of which Professor Eme talked about the data availability. So from these initiatives and strategies, we just want to hear the plan. I don't know if I'm addressing it to Minikofin or Rema, but whoever just can touch about, even the private. The key issue is the data availability, because for which we are going to be basing on, even for the planning, we need to have the real and scientifically proven data. The data is there, as it said, but scattered. So what plan to have this in our basket, the real data, which can trace for the next planning for the next 10 years, as they are going to revise the NDCs next year. But what effort are we going to put in to have this data available and which is trackable, scientifically available, not this one that is scattered as the professor mentioned. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So I think we can respond to these ones asked. Dominique, as the floor is yours, and Stella will follow you.
Thank you very much for the great question, Philbert. Yes, there is the domestic funding is also as important. And much as we want to increase the capacities of the local governments to be able to access funding, be it concessional loans or traditional funding or from the other sources, it's important also to consider what's happening locally. And there are different actors, civil society, but also private sector that are also doing a lot in terms of adaptation and mitigation at the local level. So the main framework is the stakeholders coordination mechanism at the local level, the Joint Action Development Forum. And what is important here is that in the next years, it is planned through the sector strategic plan and decentralization to strengthen further the coordination of stakeholders at the local level. And it is our hope that also this can help actually to coordinate efforts of different actors also on climate issues. So I think this is one mechanism that exists which we can look up to. And as you said, the communities also do a lot. They are important stakeholders. And we need the buy-in of the communities, the citizens, because without them, the strategies that we come up with may not be as effective. We've seen in the past instances of projects that were put in place but not properly used. And analysis indicates that it is most probably, for the fact that citizens were probably not part of the whole process. So it's important also to consider citizen and community participation in these climate discussions and the thinking about the solutions. So I think this is something that we work on with the districts when we think about the projects to ensure that the process is inclusive, that the citizens participate in the discussions and the reflections of the projects to be developed, because in the end they are the ones either to participate in their implementation or actually use whatever is brought or given to them. So I think this is what I can say, and it's a field that we look forward to working on, coordinating stakeholders and further engaging citizens in the processes of climate projects development. Thank you.
Thank you, Dominique. Stella?
Thank you, Basil, and thank you for the question. In terms of if we're able to track as a percentage of the budget the amount of money that we put into climate-related action, so I've mentioned earlier that we've put in place the climate budget tagging, which is going to help us to be able to track that. And it started in this fiscal year, actually, in 24-25. And when we started doing that, because the budget has different categories, we started with the category related to development projects. But of course, there is also recurrent budget. So with the beginning of this fiscal year, and as we are going towards the end of the first quarter, usually we do a budget execution report every quarter, which shows us how the budget has been executed. And you will see very soon, actually, if you go to the website of the ministry, And we've realized that by tagging development budget, already we can see that 8% of the budget is going into climate-related spending. The way it is done, it is classified through what is going into adaptation, mitigation, or both, or none of the two. And we were able to already see 8%. So the idea is, as we continue to implement, and the next step is now to go through the recurrent budget and have the full budget being tagged so that we're able to see every penny where it's going. The idea is now to move gradually, increasing the portion of the budget that goes into climate-related spending. And already from the MTF, we can see that it is gradually increasing from 8 to approximately 9 to 10% over the next 2 years. And hopefully, we hope that the rate will continue to increase. So that's what I can say on that.
Thank you, Foster. As well, wanted to contribute on that. Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. I want to contribute to the question of Francis on data availability. I concur with you that data is very crucial, especially to inform decision makers, to inform decision to be taken. But in a green growth and climate resilience strategy, we thought about it, and the direction we got through the strategy is to establish the climate change portal, which must be a gateway to all the resources, all the information related to climate change in this country. So the climate change portal is in place. It is not only for government, but it is catering for all the resources from academia, from development partners who have conducted various research and assessments, and of course, government institutions from different sectors. So I would like to invite everyone here to keep consulting the climate change portal, but having a portal to share the data is one thing, but also having the different assessments and research which are availing those data is another area we need to work on hand in hand with various higher learning institutions and research institutions. And also we have been having various MOUs with higher learning institutions, first to train, to develop the capacity of researchers and technocrats to do various assessments. We started with aims on greenhouse gases emissions, and also the air quality monitoring. So there is a lot of initiatives going on, but the most important is that we need to have that portal where anyone can get access the data. Thank you.
Thank you. Before giving the time for the final messages for each panelist, we have two questions from online, which I think Faustin can have a say on them. Collins Gahigi asks, I would like to ask the panel at large, how do you include just transition in all aspects of sector, whether economic sector, education, and what role should young people contribute to climate justice?
Yeah, thank you very much. Just transition and the role of youth. First and foremost, we can't talk about building resilience without changing the mindset of our people. And believe it or not, the youth is the agent of change. Once we use the youth, you are sure that the community will change and change for good. So the first and foremost role of the youth is to be the agent of change, embrace the best practices, and also lead by example. That's my my message to youth. But to be in the position to do so, for us who have been privileged to get this exposure, we need to make sure that we transfer the knowledge, we facilitate them to be the real agent of change.
So in fact, even the second question is a bit related to that. How youth as the future of Rwanda and Africa will be engaged in enhancing climate resilience. I think that's very important, but often overlooked.
So for us, I think that's maybe in other countries, but when you look at the concrete examples, when you look at the team of negotiators of Rwanda, some of those are in this room. Most of them are young and vibrant negotiators. When we reach to negotiations, everyone is asking if they are the ones who are intervening, or if there's someone behind them intervening. But it's a matter of choice. We had that choice back to 2017-18. That's when we gathered most of young graduates. We gave them the capacity building sessions. We gave them the exposure. We took them to COPs. We took them to different forums. But now they are brilliant negotiators, ever. So the lesson we learned is that once you empower the youth, you will not regret that. And that's really a call for even partners here present. Please join us to support our youth, to make sure that they get enough exposure. We have a lot of story to tell here in Rwanda. When I'm traveling to different forums, even people who doesn't have anything to showcase, people who doesn't have anything to say, they take the floor. But for us, we have a lot of stories to tell. But let's empower our youth and make sure that they are the ones carry that flag. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we close the panel discussion, so I know it will be very hard to respond to this because we only have 30 seconds for each panelist, you know, but you will try. So in a short sentence, what is the final message you want to leave our audience today? I will start with Amparo.
I think the final message will be that we are doing it right. We are getting it right in Rwanda by mobilizing private sector, by having this new climate finance department that is not, we are not just looking at climate finance spending targets, but at greening our budgets, our planning processes, and by us from the EU side to work together with the whole Team Europe present in Rwanda to deliver on the ambitious climate agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Aimé?
Yeah, thank you. So I think the key message is if we really wanted to strengthen our adaptation in the resilience, I think priorities should be given to data-driven and evidence-based research that can help to track what is going on, but more importantly, to fostering a culture of learning for improvement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dominique. The floor is yours now.
Thank you. Let's bring climate finance to the local level. We cannot win this fight without the local level. The PFM skills have increased. We can work on the project management skills. It's a call also to the funders to adopt funding frameworks to ensure that the local level is reflected and can fit. Thank you.
Thank you. Stella?
Thank you very much, Basil, and thank you for all my colleagues on the panel. I think the main message that we can give is that we are ready to attract more financing. You can see that I'm even wearing green, which means that at all levels, from all the different processes that we're implementing, systems, tools, strategies, everything is in place. But the new NST2, we need to do things differently. Innovate, have a more deliberate approach to it, instead of waiting for what we receive, but really going out and say, these are the systems that are in place. Please believe in us and invest your money. Thank you.
Thank you. A round of applause for those who had green today, like Stella and Dominique. You see the tie, and everyone who tried to wear green. So, Faustin, it's your turn.
Thank you very much. Next time you need to share the dressing code. Mine is very simple. Climate change is real. We need to act now.
Yes.
And we need to walk the talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So before we conclude, I would like to tell you that at the end of the session, we'll have a chance to network over a light snacks at the back of the auditorium. Please don't rush and go without taking our delicious snacks. So, in fact, to summarize what we discussed, today's discussion highlighted the critical role of climate finance in building resilience to climate change in Rwanda. Panelists emphasized the importance of vulnerability assessment, strategy planning, and collaboration across national and local governments, alongside financial institutions and international partners. So we heard about successful efforts to integrate climate finance into development plans, but also the ongoing challenges of resources, mobilization, and local participation, and of course the new models like what Teddy highlighted. So we discussed, of course, the data-driven approaches to ensure effective climate adaptation resilience. So we have come to the end of our panel discussion, and of course at the end of the whole program. Thank you for being here, for your active participation. I thank Faustin, Stella, Dominique, Dr. Aimé, and Amparo, and it was an absolute pleasure for me to be the MC and the moderator for today's Kigali Climate Talk. So the next Kigali Climate Talk will be happening, will take place in early December, COP29 in Baku. So we'll be having a such discussion with our friends from the international institution from everywhere in the COP. So thank you very much for today, and have a good day. Thank you.